on regions and concerns that are often neglected by mainstream media. We have some incredibly talented women journalists who have made a mark on these margins, including the session's moderator, Ms. Linda Chhakchhuak, and panelists, Ms. Namita Waikar, Managing Director of PARI, and independent journalist, Ms. AnjulikaThingnam from Manipur, and Ms. Raihana Maqbool from Srinagar, and Ms. Aheli, Moitra, Morung, Express, Nagaland. Once again, we would like to remind you that we are a neutral organization. And Ms. Pushpa Rohini. Once again, we would like to remind you that we are a neutral organization and request all participants to stick to the theme and maintain an apolitical stance.
Again. Guys, we're live.
It's good, no? He said no.
Can we move the chairs a little closer? Linda, center.
That is Pushpa.
Center.
She has to go.
बीच में आप एक दो पिक्चर लेके देंगे.
हाँ जी, हाँ. You'll be surprised.
Yeah.
Why did
They're still going to move the chairs, I think. But why this? Why not horizontal?
horizontal? The feed comes like this on phones. Yeah.
Good morning to everybody. I can see that this is a very, very lively group, you know. Maybe we're still from the kindergarten, and that's really good. That's really nice, you know. We should never grow up. So, though, of course, this is quite a serious session we're having here. It's called, I'm starting right away, okay?
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's called Reporting from the Margins. And you can see that my colleagues here, we are all from what others think are the margins, but we think we are the center of the universe, actually speaking. So I have AnjulikaThingnam from Manipur. She's an independent journalist, a veteran who has covered Manipur affairs for a long, long time. Then Raihana Maqbool from Srinagar, another end of this country. And we have Namita Waikar, who's managing editor of PARI, Pushpa Usendi from Bastar, Chhattisgarh, and Aheli Moitra, who works for the Morung Express and has been living in Nagaland since 2011, working in this newspaper Morung Express, which I think is a very big accomplishment for somebody who came from outside the state to continue to stick on there. So reporting from the margins, like we people, we always crib about being ignored by the center. Center means, you know, where the power is, whether it's power of a country, power of a newspaper, or power of any entity. We are at the margins of that because we live in places which are further away from the center of power. So we feel that our issues are always ignored. Our issues are not understood properly. And not only that, we feel that there's no effort being made even to understand what we are going through and what we are thinking of and what are the hopes for our future. So I'm very happy that we have managed to have such a panel here. And one thing I want everyone to understand is that margins doesn't only mean the geographical margins of a country, that we are from the border areas. It means the issues, that we are at the margins of the issues. We are at the fringe of things, and especially in reporting the issues which concern the marginalized people, the tribals, and the so-called lower caste issues, Dalit issues, are ignored by the entities which are in power and which have the capacity to focus on these issues, but do not do that. So we are here to talk about our experiences, and I have here 5 speakers, and maybe slightly more than an hour, so I will perhaps give them 10 minutes each. I think that will 10 minutes each. So let me begin with Anjulika. It's a long way.
And only 10 minutes.
Does anyone have a problem?
If you have a problem, we can stop.
I think there was something about...
No.
Nothing? No, it's okay. We're all journalists, so what we say is what it is. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Go, Linda.
I think if you want, you can speak from there. You might feel better, no? More better. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's it. I was a little bit worried about the step. It's on. Yeah, I'm Anjulika, and I'm sorry I have a bit of a strepsils in my mouth because I've been having a throat problem. I have been, like I said yesterday, reporting from Manipur for about 20 years now. And in the 20 years, I've seen a lot of change in Manipur, not only in the situations, general political and sociological, economic situation in Manipur, but also in the change in the way that reporting is done. Not only by people based in Manipur, in the local newspapers, but also by mainstream journalists. By mainstream, I mean journalists who come from outside of Manipur to report on issues related to Manipur. Before, I won't go into much detail, but I would just like to landmark an incident in 2004 when the youth protest happened in Manipur. That was a landmark event, not only in the situations in Manipur, when AFASPA was removed from 7 assembly constituencies in Imphal area, but also in the rush of journalists who have suddenly woken up to the fact that there's a place called Manipur and a lot of things are happening in Manipur, and there should be something about Manipur, there should be reporting on Manipur, there should be writing about Manipur. That is when we saw an onslaught of reporters, academicians coming from all over India. In the beginning, we as local journalists, our main feeling was that yes, suddenly people are recognizing the fact that we are living in troubled times and we should help them. So we went around ferrying a lot of people back and forth, offering them our food, and then taking them to meet people, identifying people for them. asking people to share their vulnerable stories with them without fear, because we are there as their interpreter. So that was how it happened, until we realized that after a short period of time, suddenly those people whom we had guided, whom we had helped, had suddenly become the new experts of the Northeast and of course of Manipur. So this was the situation that we were facing. And these were people who were employed in big organizations, earning big salaries, and of course flying in and out. They were not, traveling by bus or by train. They are flying in and out, living in 5-star hotels or 3-star hotels when they come to Manipur. And we were the journalists, the local journalists, were an editor at that time. Now the pay scale is a little bit better with the new wage board and everything coming up, but not so better like in other areas. At that time, normal journalists would be, new entrant would be getting about 1,000 rupees. And me as one of the senior journalists would be offered maybe about 4,000 a month. So when we started looking at the dynamics of reporting, and it's also a fact that there were a lot of very good writers from Manipur, senior journalists like Rupachandra, then Yambim Laba, then Kelen Thokchom, who were reporting, who were sending in stories from Manipur. But somehow the people based in Delhi or Kolkata or wherever they are, they felt that maybe it's better to fly somebody of our people in, so they will be more objective and they can report better. I don't know from where they got that kind of idea, that they can report better on situations happening in our homes. I'm sure that I know more what kind of dal I have in my house rather than what kind of dal you have in your house than in one visit. So that is the kind of situation, and a lot of the people who are writing for newspapers or publications or even sending videos, TV channels, were on a restricted budget. They are never met full-time employees, so they don't have health benefits, they don't have accident benefits, where we are living in a very conflict-prone and anything can happen to us. So there's no safety net for us. And even if you're writing for newspapers for outside for maybe more than 10 years, you're still a stranger, where every year you have to renew with them. And very recently I saw a contract, so-called contract, and it's not even a contract where you are saying that I'm a journalist based in Manipur, I've been working in Manipur for so many years, and I want to write for your newspaper. It's not a contract like that. It's a contract which says that I'm a small-time business government employee, but I want to contribute a few articles in your newspaper, esteemed newspaper, every now and then. And I found it very objectionable. I told this person close to me, I told him that you should protest against this. This is not right. They are not recognizing the fact that you have been a journalist for so many years, but the fear of being without whatever little economic security they get, not many people speak out. So the whole of Northeast is usually covered by a full-time employee based in Guwahati, who flies in every now and then like as an inspection tour, and a lot of stringers who does the hard work. And I would like to again speak from my own experience. I've been in conflict for a long time. As I said yesterday, most of the times crying with the women, and then sharing my food and even my whatever pay I get, like money I get with them, and it is very obnoxious when I get an email or a message or phone call which says that please share your experience. I'm writing a so and so book. Please write an experience with us and please name your price. So, or being asked to write a foreword for a book about Manipur, when I can well write the book myself. So it's like a bad feeling when publishing houses feel that a book written by somebody based in a city would be much better by somebody who is actually in the field. So these are the kind of gaps which we see when we talk about reporting from the margin or writing from the margin. And a lot of those books, like offers, I never took about any of these offers because I felt like, I tell that my story myself. Why should I let you tell my story? And a lot of those books became bestsellers. So I'm sure you know what kind of books I'm hinting at. So these are the kind of situations we are working with, and it's a very dangerous kind of thing. And you should remember there was a big earthquake a few years back when the Imam market was like it was sort of fell down. I mean, it was destroyed, a large chunk of it. I got a phone call from a well-known journalist from the digital media asking me for my help. And as usual, I said, how can I help you? And she said, I'm writing a story of the earthquake and how it has affected. I said, okay, so when are you coming down to Imphal? She said, no, I'm not coming down to Imphal. I wish I could, but I'm on a deadline. So can you please supply me with a few information? So I said, well, the first thing she asked was, can you please describe the market to me? Then she asked, can you share any of your contacts in the university who can give a comment? Can you give me phone numbers and names of a few women vendors, preferably who knows Hindi or English? So I have to go around the whole market searching for someone who knows Hindi or English, a market women vendor. So I told her this is very unethical. I'm also a journalist, not a lay person. If you want a story, I will write it for you for free. You don't even need to pay me. So this is the kind of, I don't know, and this is, I'm at a loss for words for this kind of attitude, and it happens. And I'm very sad to say that it's still happening. People like us, now we know that we shouldn't be cooperating with this kind of people. So we don't cooperate, but there are a lot of young journalists who run around with them hoping that at least they'll put in a good word for them. They'll be able to write for them, for a major newspaper. I mean, maybe get a better, more economic package than what they're getting at home. So, the bits and pieces with which this so-called parachute journalists, I call them parachute journalists, and a lot of people have been very nasty to me because I call them parachute journalists. And a lot of these parachute journalists, sometimes the kind of words they use, the kind of questions they ask, it worsens the situations at home, as it happened with Sharmila. A famous journalist, TV journalist, I was there when she interviewed Sharmila, and she sort of pushed the mic into her face and kept asking her, Sharmila, you have been cheated. Do you feel that you have been cheated? Your people doesn't support you. And she asked the question so many times that, and if you ask a person so many, like it's almost like putting words into somebody's mouth. And it doesn't happen in our side of the world. It doesn't happen in our way of journalism. So that kind of journalism is very detrimental to our situation. And sometimes, like, I've been asked just to give information on, share my contacts or the people on which they could share stories. And now I'm wiser. I tell them, like, look, I can give you names, I can give you phone numbers, how many you want, but you have to pay me. I can take you around the market 10 times. I can take you around to meet people. I can give you that kind of story you want. And people come to me and they asked me, like, oh yeah, I'm a photojournalist, I'm on this, I've got this fellowship from so and so, or I'm a TV journalist, or I'm a print journalist. I want to write about Manipur. Fine, write about Manipur if you want. And then they asked me, what kind of stories do you think I should write? You say, you say there's a conflict in Manipur, can you please tell me something about the conflict? Now I say, go back first, read about the conflict and then come. Think about what kind of stories you want to write and then come. I'm sharing my context with you, my people with you, thinking that you couldn't, you'll do things, make things better, or maybe highlight things. But if you are going to say something and the story goes wrong, I'm the one who's back at home. I'm the one who's going to get the backlash of what you write, of what you misunderstood. And so this is, I know, it's a sort of complaint, and I also want to complain that yes, we as freelancers, sometimes we are not paid, even by people whom we trust. But things go on, and we will still keep writing. Our voices will be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's the story of Northeast, and I can tell you that the stories have been filed, and then we find that it's all been jumbled up and then brought out in a different way in somebody else's byline, things like that always happen. Raihana Maqbool from Srinagar, and she can tell her stories which are going to be even more interesting than ours from the Northeast.
Hi everyone, I'm Raihana and I'm a journalist.
Take it closer.
Was it closer? Okay. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Raihana and I work as a reporter and photographer from Srinagar City, and I work with the news organizations based in from March. Yeah. Okay.
Voices from the mic used to be heard.
Yeah. Okay. So I start because there's a lot. We live in a conflict zone, so there's a lot here, but that will take a lot of time if I start talking about those stories. But I would like to share my experiences about how Kashmir gets reported in national and international media. So I will talk about an example. I was watching national Hindi channel, that's Z News, one day. So I was watching the reporter. So what he was doing was he had worn that Kashmiri, we call it Farran. So many of you be aware about that. So and he was, I think, he was going to some place in the border area. And while he was making his way from Srinagar city, so he was showing that all mosques and all that, and these are the mosques where the militants are being trained and all that. And what happened in between was that we have Hajj house, where the forms and applications, the people who want to go for Hajj, so they are filled there. So the person is showing that one as a mosque as well, and he's like, oh my God. I was like, oh my God, what the hell are you talking about? And the person is like, and when he gets down at one of the places, that's a road, and he's like this, he's talking so slow. He's saying that, oh my God, maybe some Kashmiri will hear me and I'll get killed or I'll get stoned and everything. So that's the propaganda. I don't talk about every news channel in India, but it's like many of the news channels are doing that. That was a complete propagandistic story, what he was talking about. He was like standing before a mosque, and he was talking in low tune that this is the mosque where the militants are being trained. I hope that I'm not getting hurt by someone. He was like that, and I was completely like, what the hell is he reporting? How do they feature such stories on Z News? And I don't watch so many Hindi news channels, but that is one report I have. I accidentally was trying some news channels, so that's one thing I saw. And this is not only about this particular news channel. There are so many news channels like The Republic, Times Now and all, and the propaganda they are showing about Kashmir, the face of Kashmir that they are showing, that's not the real Kashmir, because they have a lot. I think Times Now, The Republic, they have a huge reach in India. And that's what people of India get to hear about Kashmir. Oh my God, they are terrorists and all. So I fail to understand because I cannot go to Times Now and report for them and all. But I fail to understand because they are giving such a face of Kashmir to Indian people that whenever we are in like Delhi and all that, like many of the people see us as terrorists, like the Kashmiris, because they really never read the other stories, the other side of Kashmir. They never get to read about it. So that's one of the things that usually happens in Kashmir. And I would share other incident is that while trying to report from border areas, we need to seek permission of army if we want to go to a certain village. So they will usually deny us with permission. And if the same thing is like an Indian media person goes to them, he's not even asked the question that why are you going there? And we have to take so many permissions to go for a story, to report from that border area. While as the people from India, like Indian news channels, like the so-called news channels, they don't need such permissions. And being a Kashmiri, I'm not able to tell their story, while as the person there goes and like reports their story. And what he reports is that that's only one side of the story. They never report the other side of the story. That's like always unreported. And that's the hazards of living in conflict. And there are so many like examples of these things which I'm talking about. It's like very difficult to report about it because security. The people here who might have visited Srinagar or like the peripheries of Srinagar or the other areas, they might be aware how difficult it's like to go to certain areas, even in Srinagar city, to report certain things. I would like share an incident here. It was in curfew in Srinagar city, and I was like taking some photographs of the curfew and all. So even though I had a curfew pass from the information department, like when I was taking the photographs, the security personnel called me and told me that you have to delete these photographs. You cannot like take them. I even showed him the curfew pass, and he was like, "Come on, I do not acknowledge this," and he just like cut that curfew pass, and I had to delete those photographs, and I couldn't just show those photographs anywhere. So it's that's on one side, that's the conflict side, which you might have read the recent stories about parachute journalism in Kashmir, how journalists are carried and told to report certain stories about this and all that. And then what the other thing gets reported is that you have read about that fake encounters. They don't go and see what the story really was. And if there is an encounter, if somebody is killed, they will just say, "Oh, it was an encounter," but they really don't get to the other side to see whether it was really an encounter or not. Sometimes there are many stories which were fake encounters, and they were not reported by media. They were not reported by like most of the Indian media. I think from that angle, the international media is far better than the Indian media, because at least the international media tries to report other sides and other stories about India, about Kashmir, and that's one challenge. And personally, I have personally saying, if I talk about my challenges, there's a challenge with the society as well. Yeah, because I will share an incident here. I was still in university and I was doing a radio project for my university project. So we were, the documentary was in tourism, and we were just walking to a shop, and we were like taking quotes from the shopkeepers there. And there was a shopkeeper, and he was like, "Oh my God, girl, why are you wasting your time? This is not a good job for girls. You will never get a marriage proposal. You will not get married," and all that. and he was like, go into teaching and all that, don't waste your time in this field. So that's the one thing that we face from society, because they don't see women journalists like, as good. They are seen like they're not good. So that's one incident I had during my initial days, and I faced so many incidents like that where the people told me that, come on, why are you doing journalism? You should leave it, go for some better jobs and all. And then there's another challenge while doing certain kinds of stories. I would share a story here. There's a local newspaper, there was a local reporter who had done a story about gays and lesbians in Kashmir. So just after one day, there were a lot of comments on the Facebook page by the Molvis and all that. What the hell are you reporting? And what the editor had to do, he had to take that story down the other day, and he had to make an apology. He drew an apology letter that this story was wrong and this is not really happening in Kashmir. So that's one thing. Certain things that people in Kashmir don't want to acknowledge. Even though the people said, come on, if it's happening, why do you need to report this? You are making the society worse by reporting all these things. And there's other stories. Like Basira is there. She did a story on child sexual abuse, and there were also people telling her and like commenting her that why are you writing on child sexual abuse? Because that story also carried child sexual abuse by religious people, the peers and all that. So the people were like, why are you doing such stories? You should not report such stories. Even if it's happening, why do you report such stories? Yeah, we don't want to listen to these stories. We know that it's happening, but you are telling it to a people, to like national people, to international people, and what image will they get of Kashmir? That is this really happening in Kashmir? Because Kashmir is a complete like Islamic society. It's 90% of Muslims there. So, sorry. So these are the challenges which we faced, and yeah, I have like a lot of stories to tell, but the time is running out, and if anybody wants to ask me to come to me later, I'll talk about the other stories as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the kind of situations that journalists face. Like they don't know whether to report or not to report. If they report, they have to face something from one side. If they don't, they face something from the other side. Well, I guess that's the story we have from all kinds of peripheral areas and all kinds of controversial areas. Next I'll call Namita Waikar. She's managing editor of PARI, and PARI reports about rural development, the issues from the rural areas, which is another kind of margins, and where issues are not focused on by the mainstream media. And that is why I think there was a need to have such a kind of a website like this, where they collate all the stories from the rural areas and from the marginalized areas. Namita?
Thank you, Linda. First of all, thank you to NWMI to give an opportunity to speak here. I'll be talking a little about PARI, which is People's Archive of Rural India, and I will also be specifically talking about the Grindel Songs project, which I am anchoring and I am writing for that project. So, on PARI, actually we have categories of stories like women, Dalits, Adivasis, farming crisis, rural in the urban. So each of these categories or types of stories, they focus on specific issues related to the people about whom there is hardly any reporting in the mainstream media. And we do have reporters who go from the urban areas to the rural areas to report people who have been doing this for many years. But in addition, we also have people who work on assignments or who are PARI fellows who report from a particular region. So for example, we have a person called Stanzin who is reporting from Ladakh, and so she is a native of Ladakh. She is not a journalist by profession. She was actually a medical student who decided that she wanted to report about her region. So she is one of the PARI fellows and she writes stories from there. So this is one example of the kind of local regional reporting that we have from the areas which are underreported. Similarly, we have reports from the Sundarbans and from all the states in India and specific regions which are not talked about. We have a fellow who reports about the pastoral nomads from all over India, from Tibet, from the desert regions, and these are most of them are photo essays and photo stories because the reporter is actually a photographer. So the other aspect of stories on PARI is they are multimedia stories in audio, video, text of course, and photography. So I will just run through a few more examples of the kind of people who report for PARI. We have something called the Book of Bandipur, which is a set of 7 stories written by tribals from Karnataka. And for example, there is a story called When Jayama Spotted a Leopard. Now, Jayama is someone who lives in the tribal region in Karnataka, and this is a story which she told in her own language, and it was translated to English. And she was given a camera, a simple point and shoot, and she took photographs of a leopard from not very far away. She actually did spot that leopard and she took a photograph. So the story is about her. She is given a photograph of the leopard footprints and the pug marks, and she writes about what she feels when she is walking from her village to, let's say, the marketplace, and she knows that there is the danger of the leopard in the surroundings. So these are stories of the people, by the people in that sense. So they are the everyday lives of everyday people, the stories on PARI. The other project which I will talk about is the Grindmill Songs project, which there were 2 founders of this project called Moitra, who is a Frenchman, and Raihana Maqbool from Pune. They were social scientists, both of them are no more, but they wanted to work with rural women in Maharashtra to ask them to kind of empower them by helping themselves. So they started to meet village women and ask them to tell them about themselves. And the women were not very communicative. So when they said, like, why don't you talk to us? They said, see, there are these songs. We use the grind mill, which is the chakki for grinding atta, for making atta from, say, wheat or rice or jowar or bajra. And they would use that, and while they were doing that every day, they would sing these OVs. It's called an OV, which means strung together, you know. So they are words strung together, they are couplets. And the women said that we express ourselves through these songs. So these are songs which are on topics which range from childbirth, marriages, adolescence, women's lives, of course, There are Dalit women who have sung songs about the atrocities they face, and about Baba Saheb Ambedkar, about Mahatma Phule, about Mahatma Gandhi, about the brother and sister relationships, about husband and wife, about father and mother, about sexual relationships, about women telling other women not to make eyes at her husband, about there is an OV which tells a girl that daughter, you are such a favorite, you are so favorite that your brother has given away a beetle leaf plantation to you. Now, which is of course a very nice OV. The underlying meaning in this OV is also that the daughter doesn't own land. The brother is gifting it to her. So these are the different contexts of each OV that I try to bring out when we publish an edition of the Grindmill Songs project. So till now we've published about 27 editions, and we've covered 210 songs, that is the couplets. The collection has about 110,000 songs. Okay, so a young volunteer, we had a PARI conference in December but there are a couple of OVs that I would read out the translation. The internet connection is not strong enough for me to play it, I was trying to figure that out, but I'll just read out the translation. So there is a singer from Beed district in Majalgaon Taluka, from the Majalgaon village itself. She sang that now she belongs to the Dalit community, and they have moved out of Hinduism, and they've taken Buddhism. So she says, daughter of a Brahmin, why are you sprinkling water in the courtyard? We have gone to Buddha's mansion. Now you drag the dead animals. So she's telling them that we are no longer here to do all the dirty work for you. You do it yourself. There are many songs on women's lives and how women are treated. Especially for women, when they are in their youth, they get, this is an experience which even in urban India, the women in urban India also face. People telling you, why are you standing there? Why are you standing in the doorway? Don't go here. When you are walking anywhere, look down. Don't look at anyone else. Otherwise, people will blame your family. So one of the OVs is burn this youth. So she's talking about her, the adolescent girl who is now becoming a youth. Burn this youth. Let my blossoming into a woman be burnt. So in Marathi she says, Zaru Zaru Tarun Pada, let it burn. You say Jalne Do in that tone. My mother Gandhari gets the blame. So even if I stand in the doorway, they say this girl is not a good character. She is not a good character because probably even her mother is not a good character. And then it goes on, and in the village it will spread very easily. So she says that instead of going through this, let my youth itself burn. I don't want to become a woman. In another OV she says that if I knew I would be born a woman, I would not have been born. I would rather be a tulsi plant because people at least respect the plant. In another one she says, which fool has thought of giving birth to a woman? Because she is only working on rent in somebody else's house. So when you read these listen to these OVs, you really understand what these women want to say. And these OVs are not, there is no mention of the author of these OVs, although we know who are the women who have contributed these. And in the articles we publish, we mention their name, we have their photographs. We, since April this year, since March this year, we have started visiting the villages. I go myself with a team of people, and we try to take photographs of all these women who have contributed these songs. Now these songs were given almost 20 to 25 years ago. So some of the women are not alive anymore, so we meet their families then, and we take a photograph of the woman's photograph, which is framed. Sometimes we meet her daughter or her daughter-in-law who sings some of those songs. Sometimes we discover that two singers are actually mother and daughter, because we visit them and that's how we know. And the other thing now that recently in some of the visits we discovered was, now the youngsters in the village are not aware of these songs, because the grind mill, which is, that two stones, circular stones which they used to use. In some village homes you still have it, but it's not used often now. So they are not very, and the songs went away because nobody uses them. So the youngsters are surprised that their mothers and their grandmothers knew so much. And now it's available on the internet. So then some of them have smartphones, they try to look for it and they try to listen. And it's like a sense of pride that something from their village is now reaching elsewhere. So although we publish this articles in English and we translate the songs into English, we also translate the entire article into Marathi as well. And we send either the printouts or the links to the people from the village, and we try to share it with them. So I would urge all of you to visit ruralindiaonline.org and listen to some of the songs, the audios and the videos. Thank you.
Thank you, Namita, for keeping the time. So let me not waste any more in any comments. I'll ask Pushpa Usendi, Bastar, another hotbed, to say the piece.
I just want to are there people who do not understand Hindi?
सभी को मेरा नमस्ते। मेरा नाम पुष्पा उसेंदी है। मैं बस्तर के बीजापुर एरिया में काम करती हूँ दैनिक प्रखर समाचार के लिए। मैं अपने बारे में कुछ बताना चाहती हूँ कि मैं कैसे पत्रकारिता के लाइन में आई। मैं कक्षा 10 तक हॉस्टल में पढ़ाई की। मैं बहुत गरीब घर की हूँ, इसलिए मैंने हॉस्टल में पढ़ाई की 10 तक। फिर मेरे पापा पैरालिसिस थे, तो मम्मी की हेल्प के लिए मैं प्रखर समाचार में टेबल वर्क करती थी 600 रुपए के लिए। फिर मैंने अपनी मम्मी की मदद करते करते काफ़ी टाइम हो गया और मुझे प्रखर समाचार में बहुत कुछ सीखने मिला। और टेबल वर्क से मुझे दैनिक प्रखर समाचार जिला ब्यूरो के लिए मैं आगे आई और फिर वहीं बैठ के मैंने 12th भी किया और कॉलेज भी किया।
Am I audible? Pushpa hails from a very poor family, and she could not. She was in her class 10 when she was forced to work. So she worked with Prakhar, Dainik Prakhar, with whom she is currently also engaged. She did a lot of desk work, so putting things together and even maintaining files, writing out certain things. This was the work that she was doing when she was in class 10, and gradually she managed to finish her 12 while she was doing the study, and then she took up a proper job with Prakhar Samachar, with whom she is currently engaged. Her father was down with paralysis, and as a result of which she could not continue with schooling, and therefore she had to take on this job.
She was paid 600 rupees. 600 rupees. She was paid 600 rupees then.
She was paid 600 rupees. You paid 600 rupees. Everybody got it.
मैंने वहाँ रहते काम किया और फिर मैं बीजापुर जिले में जब काम करने गई तो मुझे वहाँ के आदिवासियों के साथ ज़्यादा लगाव था, क्योंकि मैं भी लोकल आदिवासी हूँ। और वहाँ मैंने देखा कि फेक एनकाउंटर, गांव में जाके पुलिस परेशान करना, और भी कई सारी दिक्कतें हैं। सरकार की कई योजनाएं हैं जो उन गांव में रहने वाले, जंगलों में रहने वाले लोगों तक नहीं पहुँच पाई है, जिनके लिए मैं आज भी काम कर रही हूँ।
So Pushpa stayed in Jagdalpur while she was doing her schooling in 12th, and she was offered the 600 rupees to go as a bureau chief, but she wanted to continue to work in Bijapur because she has herself an Adivasi, and she knows the kind of situation that the Adivasi community is facing. She's also knows about the number of fake encounters that are happening, and she wanted to, and also that government schemes and programs and a lot of facilities is now being given to the Adivasi. So she was very keen to work in Bijapur.
मेरे साथ एक केयर को लेकर काम करने के दौरान एक हादसा भी हुआ था। गंगालूर एरिया में गंगपुर गांव में दो एक लेडीज एक जेंट्स को मार दिया था पुलिस ने। उस पर मैंने काम किया 30 किलोमीटर पैदल जंगल चल के। फिर जब आया कि पुलिस को उस पर अच्छा नहीं लगा कि पुलिस को पता चल गया कि फेक एनकाउंटर पे काम किया है पुष्पा ने, तो वो कुछ दिन बाद मेरे हस्बैंड को मारने की कोशिश भी की। वो 10 दिन हॉस्पिटल में भी एडमिट रहे। उस दौरान उनको चोटें आई थी काफ़ी। मैं उस समय बीजापुर में थी, वो दंतेवाड़ा में थे, अपने काम करते वहाँ पे। वहाँ कुछ लड़के घर से उनको बुला के ले गए और उनके साथ मारपीट किए और उनको बोला कि आगे से आप लोग ऐसा मत करना।
There was one incident she narrates about in Gangalur area in Bijapur, of a village Gampur, where a man and a woman were killed in a fake encounter, and Pushpa had gone to cover it. And as she came back and she filed a report, her husband was beaten up directly police की तरफ से या किसी को भेजा गया?
She had walked 30 kilometers on foot.
Yeah, she walked about 30 kilometers on foot, reached up to the village and covered the story. And when the police knew that it is actually exposing what they have done, they sent somebody to beat up her husband. Her husband was hospitalized for 10 days, and he was asked that Pushpa should be told not to do this kind of reporting.
इस तरह की रिपोर्टिंग मत करना।
So when the people who came to beat up her husband, they told him that Pushpa should not be doing this kind of reporting.
बस्तर में महिला पत्रकारों की कमी तो है। मैं अकेले ही हूँ जो काम कर रही हूँ, पर और लोगों को भी जुड़ने की ज़रूरत है, क्योंकि वहाँ ऐसे कई सारे दिक्कतें आती हैं सबको, और सबको लोकल लोगों को जुड़ने की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है। उसके साथ बाहर के लोगों को भी जुड़ने की ज़रूरत है बस्तर में, ताकि वो सारे जो आवाज़ें आ रही है वो बाहर तक आए और पता चले बाकी राजनीतिक लोगों को कि वास्तव में वहाँ विकास हो रहा है या नहीं हो रहा है।
It is true that there are very few women journalists in Bastar. There is a need for more and more women journalists from the local to join journalism. But she's saying that there should also be people from outside the local area to join them, because it is important for the news to come out. It is important for people to know what is exactly happening in those regions.
मैं अपने बीजापुर जिले में 30 पत्रकारों में अकेली महिला पत्रकार हूँ। मुझे कभी कभी उनके साथ जब मैं जाती हूँ काम करने तो मुझे बड़ा अजीब सा भी लगता है, पर मेरे हस्बैंड मुझे हमेशा पुश करते हैं पीछे से कि आप अकेले ही सब पे भारी हो।
30 reporters in Bastar. In Bastar, she is the only woman reporting. So when she has to go with them, along with them, so her husband jokes that she says that she feels a little awkward going around with 30 men. So her husband says that, but you are single-handedly enough. You are heavy enough for them.
You take them on.
You should take them on.
और मुझे लगता है कि बस्तर में और बाहर के पत्रकारों को आकर देखना चाहिए कि आधार कार्ड, वोटर आईडी, चावल पे राजनीति कैसे हो रही है, कैसे बस्तर में लोगों के साथ इस तरह का खिलवाड़ हो रहा है कि उन्हें 1 रुपए किलो चावल दे दिया और आधार कार्ड नहीं है तो फिर उनको चावल नहीं मिलेगा। कई लोग तो ऐसे भी हैं जंगल में आदिवासी जिनको महीनों चावल नहीं मिलता, वो बहुत मेहनत करते हैं। मनरेगा से जो सरकारी योजना की काम आते हैं उस काम में उनको काम तो करा दिया जाता है पर पेमेंट नहीं मिलता उनको, जिसके कारण भी उनको दिक्कतें आती हैं।
So she says it's important for people from outside to come and report from Bastar to see that how Aadhaar card is being used to deny them the public distribution, the cereals that is to get from the public distribution system. How MNREGS work is being done by the villagers but no payment is being done. चावल की राजनीति, the politics behind giving them the free supply of rice in the PDS at the rate of 1 rupee is said to be given, but actually what happens, that is something which needs to be exposed.
बस्तर के गाँव में आदिवासियों को पढ़ने की और पढ़ाने की बहुत ज़्यादा आवश्यकता है, क्योंकि अगर वहाँ के लोग पढ़ेंगे नहीं तो 1 रुपए किलो चावल में ही रहेंगे और दूसरे का ही काम करते रहेंगे, वो खुद से कुछ नहीं कर पाएंगे। और हमेशा आदिवासियों को ऐसे ही दबाया जाता है। जो ऊंचे तबके के लोग होते हैं जो राजनीति करना चाहते हैं वो हमेशा अपनी राजनीति के लिए कुछ भी उपयोग में लाके लोगों को दबाने की कोशिश करते हैं।
It's extremely important for the Bastar Adivasis to educate or literate themselves because by keeping them illiterate, the people play a lot of politics. They keep them in that 1 rupee supply of rice, and they want to maintain that so that they can continue to play the politics around them. So it's very important that they do.
हेल्थ पे भी वहाँ काम करने की जरूरत है, क्योंकि वहाँ चर्म रोग प्लस खुजली सा उनको हो जाता है, तो वो समझ नहीं पाते और कभी कभी अपने बड़े मतलब अपने जो गांव में झाड़ फूक वाले होते हैं उनसे वो लोग इलाज करवाते हैं और काफी डेथ भी होती है। और वो क्या करते हैं, सूखा मतलब मटन जो होता है किसी भी चीज का, मुर्गा का, बकरे का, उसे सुखा के वो लोग बांस में खाते हैं और बारिश के दिनों में खाते हैं क्योंकि सब्जी उनको मिलती नहीं है, उससे वो बीमार भी पड़ते हैं। उस पर भी मैंने कई स्टोरियां की है, पर सरकार इस पे भी ध्यान नहीं दे रही है।
There are a lot of health related issues. One, the health schemes are not reaching them, and she's talking about how they end up, because the health services are not efficient or not at all there. They put
not quacks, local
traditional healers. And there are a number of deaths that are happening because of taking them not to the appropriate doctors. She also spoke about, they tend to dry meat and have it during the rainy season. And there are a lot of ailments because of that. And she's covering a number of stories on the health situation, but the government is not paying any attention to the deteriorating health conditions.
सरकार की बहुत सारी योजनाएं हैं जिनको गांव में अंदर जाके बताने की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है, और उन आदिवासियों को सबसे ज़्यादा उन पत्रकारों की ज़रूरत है जो इस तरह के प्रोग्राम को लाए और उनको बताए कि सरकार की कौन सी योजनाएं हैं जो सिर्फ उनके लिए हैं और उनको उस पे आगे आना चाहिए और उसका योजना का लाभ लेना चाहिए, ताकि उनको उनके जीवन स्तर में कुछ अच्छा बढ़ोतरी आए।
The number of reporters are required to bring back. Sorry, my confusion.
सरकार की कई योजनाएं हैं जिसको उन आदिवासियों तक पहुंचना बहुत जरूरी है मीडिया के माध्यम से।
Through media, she feels that the schemes of the government should reach the Adivasis, and therefore she feels that there is a need to, because most of them are not aware this rightfully belongs to them, so that needs to be reported, and so that they take it back to the Adivasis.
लक्ष्मी जी और मालिनी जी का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया यहाँ तक आने के लिए।
New entrance into the NWMI. NWMI is when things happened with me. They actually came out with a very strong letter. I'm very happy about that. So that this time we get another person who's right there in Bijapur, working and reporting from there to be a part of this.
Thank you. When Pushpa, she emphasized on the importance of reporting by journalists about what's happening in very, very remote areas, and how just a small piece of information, some hard work by reporters, and if the reports come out, how it helps the people at the field level. Now let me call Aheli, a remarkable young lady who has left home and gone and lived in Nagaland and worked in a newspaper for such a long time that I'm surprised myself that she has lasted for so long. Let her tell her story herself in her own words. Oh, just a minute before I pass the mic to Aheli. This is a message from Chitra Anthem on the NWMI WhatsApp group. Chitra Anthem is a member from Manipur, and she writes, I'm not there physically, but so want to add 3 points. The insensitivity of the declared objective parachute journalist. When Sharmila Iram, broke her fast with a few drops of honey, many TV journalists missed the moment because they didn't know, they were not there. Then when they landed there in Manipur, they wanted her to recreate that scene all over again for the TV.
Terrible.
So that's a message.
The TV journalists, when Sharmila broke her fast, there were a lot of journalists. She could not walk from the court to the vehicle because of all the journalists. And she went, so she was supposed to go to one place, but they went another place. And there were only a few, one or two TV journalists who actually captured the moment of Sharmila breaking her fast, putting this one, which became so famous, putting honey on her bed and then trembling hand putting it on her hand. And when the others came to know, they all came rushing and they wanted her to do it again. Because they missed that exclusive moment.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Linda, for those remarkable words. The remarkability is really not on my part. I one fine day basically took a train into Dimapur and I landed up there knowing nobody. And it was really the Naga journalist community, the community that really took me under their wings and kept me there and hosted me, let me learn journalism from scratch once again, because I was initially trained in the Indian Express many years ago, and Anjali and I were talking about it while we were here. And the way journalism is done in Chura Gully, for example, is very different from how it is done in Duncan Musti, where the office of the Morung Express is located, which is where I went to work in 2011. And I went to work there for 2 months, before which I met Anjulika and Chitra in Phal, and I was really scared that Chitra was on a scooty and she was taking me around town after dark, and all the stories we had heard, and I was like, what is this woman up to? She's going to get me killed. But eventually when I came to work in Dimapur, I realized how amazingly safe it is for women journalists to really work there, and me being sort of like an outsider journalist and having made it so far, really changed the way I thought, at least, about how things are for women there, how it is for outsiders to go and live there, how it is for how Nagas connect with communities outside, with neighboring communities of the region itself. And it really made my work, in a sense, like a lot more successful, reporting on communities, how communities really act, but not in the language that I was trained to work in, but I really had to adopt and make the language of, adopt the language of the Naga people, how stories are reported through the narrative of the people, whether it's from the perspective of women, whether it's from the perspective of different tribes. And I must say that it's much easier for people like me because I'm not from a particular clan, I'm not from a particular tribe. So, controversial things, they're like, Aheli. No matter what I say, it's okay because at the end of the day.
Where are you from?
Oh, I'm not from anywhere, so I don't exactly have a home. But my parents live in Mumbai. So I did my graduation in Mumbai, from where I was here and there, met Lakshmi in Kathmandu, and that's how I came to know about human rights and eventually made my way to the Naga areas. And there are about Nagaland Post, Morung Express, Nagaland Page. These three and Eastern Mirror are the four main English dailies. And more read than ours is basically the vernacular Ao daily, which is called Tirimium. And there are a few more, another Angani daily called Chapi. These are much better read than the English papers. But the problem for the papers is basically the income, because we really do not make any money. Advertising is very poor, and circulation we cannot make money out of because it's very difficult to circulate the papers. And we were in a conversation in the morning talking about how difficult it is for our papers to be, because our printing press, so we use papers like ours which are really poor, use like a third hand printing press from I don't know when. It's like this huge machine and it takes a lot of time to print the papers. So say 1 o'clock we finish printing in the morning, it takes like 9 hours to deliver the papers anywhere else. And the cars break down every other day because of the roads are so poor. So even though we're writing for the local context, what happens is, how do we reach it out? So we have to make sure like our website is like really low res, so that even on 2G connection that Modi promised should at least they are able to read that sort of news. But even to the places we are able to deliver it, it will be like in town centers, so only a few people will be subscribers, and like the entire village will come around and read the papers. So we have to make, even if we write correct sentences, sometimes people tell us that it's too difficult, the English is just too difficult for us to read, so we have to constantly find ways to, like, how do we construct it in a way that's simpler and simpler and simpler for people to read. And we are so used to writing simpler and simpler and simpler that when we have to write for, say, mainstream media houses of any kind, whether websites or newspapers, it becomes very difficult for local journalists to turn that, to make that transition and make the language more fancy, one, fancy, and two, readable for everyone in general. Because I remember there was one experience of a journalist, like, we tried to get the local journalists to write as much as possible. But what happens is, there will be a lot of like mainstream websites that will insist on saying insurgents, they are all insurgents. And then how do we change that frame of reference to something that says that, the people is, or do you know what I mean? There's like a very different, like, it's as if we are working on parallel frames. So even if locals do want to write, and actually Manipur has more experience than in the Naga areas. So we struggle a lot. So what happens is most of us just bottle ourselves into writing just for example, the Morung Express. But even to write just for the Morung Express is such a difficult task that imagine the just areas where Naga people stay. Nagaland, all of the 11 districts, which are anyway difficult to reach. The eastern ones are very difficult to reach. Forget about crossing over to Burma. Then there are the Naga areas in Tirap, Changlang, say Arunachal, which you cannot reach if you don't go through Itanagar. Then there are Assam, Karbi Anglong, and Dima Hasao. Then you have Manipur hills, where, how do we even talk about those issues? How do we talk about the issues with neighboring peoples, the Meiteis? How do we talk about the Zomi people? And how do we talk about the relation, like the three-way relationship going on there? Those are the things we try to talk about, keeping sensitivity also towards the neighborhoods of the Naga areas, so that there is like a constant conversation of life. Now, how that conversation we have been able to translate it into beyond this region is like something not clear to us. We have not been able to do it. Definitely journalists visiting from outside have definitely not been able to do it, and our experience is very similar to what Anjulika was talking about, or what Raihana, you were talking about, that things get completely misportrayed. People will come when there is issues like 33% reservation was not given, so everything must be, these barbaric people. So there is always these barbaric people undertone in almost all the reporting that happens when people come from outside. But the advantages of living in these nice areas is people like us who are community-less really find a community and are able to tell stories through the perspective of communities, which is very, very different. Like a death in Bombay is death of, say, a 50-year-old is of a 50-year-old woman, say, is reported in a very different way than how it is reported, say, in Dimapur. Because days after that, women will rally for justice because there is no justice system. How do we look at alternative forms of justice? How do we look at these movements that are happening colony-wise? How are women organizing? How is the youth organizing through every colony? I mean, the organization is so good. It's like superior. And in the cities, we have not even seen something close to it. So movements that happen in these regions are not necessarily political movements or, these huge political ideas we have. Sometimes movements are just like these colony-wise movements, and covering them is such a delight because we've just never seen any, at least I haven't seen, let me correct myself, I haven't seen anything like it. And the fact that the Nagas were prepared to train me and prepared to let me make all the stupid mistakes I was making, saying really silly things of stereotyping, they let me, take my time and make those mistakes and, go beyond them. To be able to form a collaboration between, say, an outsider and an insider. How do we look at the space called home through the lens of the outsider and the insider, and use the newspaper? The newspaper is basically a village diary in the Naga context. So it's like every drop of whatever information we get, we have to carry it. And if we don't, it's going to be like next day a union is going to be in our office saying, what's wrong? What did we do wrong to you? So we have to carry everything, and what happens is, it's begun recently in the past 2 years, the NIA is landing up at our office every now, saying you have carried secessionist stuff and seditious stuff, how could you do that? And these buggers are really scared. They come by the morning train, they leave by the evening train. They come with a bunch of policemen with them, and these are tall, big guys. They have no courage to be here. But they walk into a newspaper office one time and they say, we want XYZ information, and from where did you get it? They'll walk into our rooms and say, open your computer, open your email address and show us what came from where, etc. I had to negotiate for 7 hours. But if, I was in a position to speak in Hindi to them. I was in a position to say that, no, dude, this is not done. You cannot walk into our office and demand this because it's absolutely not done. We'll meet you in court. Mona Lisa Chankija, for those of you who know her, we called her immediately because she's the senior journalist there. Like, what do we do? She said, don't give it, take them to court. I said, okay, we'll take you to court. They said, okay, let's meet in court. Then my publisher's like, there's no need to be overcourageous over this. Give them whatever they need. It's not such a big deal. But it kept happening. It's not ending there. Even now, they treat it like evidence of some kind, and we're like, what are you going to do? Our gates are always open. You walked in. Tomorrow, NSMK can walk in and say that, why aren't you carrying our stuff? It is not possible for us not to carry their stuff because your propaganda stuff we are carrying every day. How can you ask us not to carry that side? Because we are balanced, we are an objective paper, we are going to carry this side also, that side also. And they're like, nahi, madam, aise thodi na hota hai, hum to achhe ke bhi aaye. I was like, I understand your good intentions. The point is, we also have to be well intended, right? So, these sort of problems have been piling up more and more. As you know, I think in 2015, all the newspapers in Nagaland had a blank editorial because the Assam Rifles was really pressurizing us on a particular case where where their shooting caused the death of 2 kids, and they kept saying there were insurgents around, we were shot at. And they said this within like half an hour of the incident happening, when they didn't have a report of what had happened. How are we to carry what they are saying? They called us for a press conference, and for the army it's like, let's treat the local journalists with some booze, and that's good enough. And at a press conference where they have shot dead 2 children, they are giving us beer and all these people, bowing over us. I was like, we got into a big, and we got into a big fight at that point. Like, if your children had been shot dead, would you be serving liquor at a place where, you've called for a press conference, what are you doing? We had a big showdown with the army that day. And eventually that incident led to, us going to the PCI? Did you? Or there was like a hearing in Guwahati, I think. I think it was a press council. So that became a huge showdown eventually, but this is the good thing. That the newspapers there could take a stand was a miracle, because the army presence there is huge. The army, it is very easy for them to intimidate because all of us have friends. They come and they take photos from here. And they'll pretend like, suppose they're taking a group picture with you, with their CEO and everything. And I've seen their photographers zooming in on like each person around. So everybody in the Naga areas has a file. And I'm sure in Imphal also it will be like the same. Now working in these conditions, you know that every day you're being watched. Every piece that we write, there's a clipping that has been put in a file, which we realized when the hearing happened. They had a huge file and documentation of everybody and everything. So now what journalists have to do, where we fight for bylines everywhere else, we have stopped taking bylines. It's just Morung Express news. So even like excellent stories have to go without bylines, because we don't know where trouble is going to happen. And this is not just like with the army, but also like with communities. Sometimes you get identified with, you are pro-X tribe, or you're pro-X politics. So what happens is the byline becomes like a difficult thing to take. So most of our stories have not gone in without bylines, whereas there are, all of us, including all of our team, has done excellent stories. So in any case, so we tried to do, like, we had a great conversation in the morning since last night with Namita, that more of our journalists should really have fellowships where we are comfortably able to write in our own language. Of course it's English, but even English has very many tones to it. And I hope we can find some of these collaborations where we help our local team to be able to be more confident and not feel like it's a futile exercise in everyday reporting on these matters. I think anything else we'll talk about during the discussion. Thank you.
We have also lost count of how many times the NIA and the PCI have been making trips to Manipur over the same kind of issues.
Thank you, Aheli. Just let me try and sum up the feelings here that has come out from my panelists here. Number one is that we find it's very difficult to get our issues highlighted in the mainstream newspapers, which have a huge coverage, and where information about our marginalized areas or marginalized issues can get a wider coverage, and more people can come to know about these, so that there is some kind of impact on the minds of people, and maybe some changes in the mind of the decision makers, which can bring positive things to these areas. Then number two is that has come out is that there is some kind of distrust of people of the marginalized areas, or people who are writing about issues like maybe some might call them activists, these issues. So they distrust the mainstream papers, distrust writers from these regions and writers of issues of marginalized peoples, of human rights, of reporting for where there is a heavy-handed government policies at work. And so those issues are the mainstream newspapers distrust journalists, even journalists from these areas, to do an objective report about these areas. And this is a problem because they send in parachute journalists who go ahead and distort it even more and make it unrecognizable. So these are some of the issues that has come up. And another thing is that the journalists are so poorly paid that journalism is not a profession that any sane person would pursue in our areas. Who would work for 4,000, 5,000 bucks? But here we are, we have slogged on. And I can tell you stories about journalists, my colleagues, who have worked in such kind of conditions. They could have gone ahead and done so many other things and made bags of money, but for some reason they persisted. They were baptized into journalism, which has become some kind of a religion, And there are people who use even the little money that they have to bring out their newspapers, the small tiny newspapers, and then after the money finishes, because there's no advertisement revenue, so they go back and work for another small newspaper. Then when they have enough money again, they say, oh, let's go ahead. It's like an addiction, actually. And then again, there you go and start your small little newspaper, and you have a nice time for a few years. So I think it's some kind of let's call it, we are actually in these areas. I don't know, mainstream newspapers, the big newspapers, they may be getting a huge pay packet, but I don't think that is really true even now. The journalism is a very insecure kind of a profession. And since we're talking about the margins, I think the profession itself is becoming marginalized. It's a marginal, nobody wants to, you can be a success maybe if you go and join what I call the running dogs media. The media which will speak, which will clear the way for a neoliberal state to exploit all the others who are not part of that huge machine of exploitation. So I think we at the margins are facing this kind of a state policy, and the danger here, which I want all of us to realize, is that marginalization is now the story of a new heavy-handed neoliberal state trying to become an economic power, and the use of security issues to further the cause of this kind of a profit-making machine. So this is where journalists have to be very careful, have to be really, alert about who they are serving and what they are writing for, and whether they are writing keeping true to the creed of journalism. That means, I think that the one thing about journalism, okay, we talk about journalism as giving information, as providing awareness, that's all very fine. But I think the main job of a journalist is to question power, to see why the powerful are not, do not create policies which help the less powerful, the voiceless, to come up and have a proper life where there is justice, where they can get their rightful share of whatever there is to share. So I think we journalists should remember that, and it's a forum like this kind of a network of journalists where we can share right from our heart about what we feel, about what we experience, and we have people from, who have been working in the mainstream journalism, who are out there, and we feel that by speaking like this kind of conversation will help us to further to work out how we can become better journalists, write better stories, and not only that, how we can have an impact on the decision makers so that we can make a real change in the grassroots lives, in our own lives and in the grassroots lives. And the last point I want to make is that the working condition of journalists has to be seriously discussed. Very soon there will not be anybody who wants to be journalist unless you want to be an advertisement journalist. No, we don't want that to happen, so we have to take this very seriously. before we marginalize ourselves and our profession into such a corner that we will not have any place where we can write, where we can, where our stories can be there for the wider public to see. It's all right to have small websites doing this and that, but I think we have to think of a way to really have an impact in a larger way. So I won't take more of your time, and thank you very much, all my panelists here, so much. Yeah, I will. Thank you, my panelists, for sharing your experiences. I'll open the floor for questions. And how much time do we have? 10 minutes? Okay, I'll take maybe 3 questions and then they can answer if it is a question or a comment. Please, anybody?
So I have a question for Raihana. From what you described as we are a group of women journalists, apart from the things that all journalists face, do you as a woman journalist and a photojournalist face anything specific when you're reporting in Kashmir?
Okay, there are like several issues as a woman journalist that I'm facing in Kashmir. Is first that we don't have any news association or any working journalist. Okay, so first issue is that we don't have any women's association in Kashmir. None. Okay, so did you get the first issue? And the second issue is that we have very handful of women journalists in Kashmir. Like I can count them on my hands, so it's like 10 or 12, that's it. And it becomes very difficult when we have like any issue and we want to raise it and there are no women journalists. So it becomes very difficult if like I'm facing a problem and I don't have people supporting me because the male journalists, I don't know about them, but we have very few women journalists there who can stand up for me, who can like talk about my problem. We don't have any association there. And these are the issues that I'm facing. And if we'll say that, today we have like 10 journalists or 12 female journalists in Kashmir, tomorrow they may be like only 8 because, it's like, they leave it like they just work for like 5 months, 6 months, and if they get a government job, they just land in it, or they take like other jobs in banks and all that. So next day I find that, oh come on, this girl was working in a newspaper, and today she's in a bank. Oh, how did it happen? So it usually keeps happening. That's like one of the main issues there. We need a working woman journalist association there, which we do not have. Many times like try to form it, but it never does. Now we are added into some male journalist association. That's hardly working, doesn't work. And And then I would say other issue as a woman journalist that I face is that whenever we go to report like any story related to conflict, like an encounter is going to take place or something like that, so I don't find any other woman journalists there. Like, basically they don't go to cover such things there. Then there's other issue, if there are girls who are working in local newspapers, they are given those beats like health, children, education. They are not given those strong beats. The editor will not tell them to go and do investigative stories. He will, because they take it that like, women are weak, so they provide them with small like beats or that are easy for that like girl to do. And girls also prefer like they take these beats and they do stories on them. These are the issues that.
Could you not?
Anyone else?
Tell him not to fiddle with it in the middle of an answer. so disruptive.
I'm Sugandhi, consultant with studies. My question is to the members of NWMI, how this forum has taken up the issue of the murder of Gauri in Bangalore.
That's
fine.
Ask the question related to what we said.
Fine, I will have my question.
Thank you, all of you. It was a very fascinating session, and I think we got a lot from all of your reports on the problems that you all are facing and the challenges you have. So my thing is really part comment. I think I was very struck by the fact that someone like Raihana just said, for instance, today about how women are given the softer beats, the less problematic things. And a little bit of what Aheli was saying earlier about reporting in places where the community takes, decides what kind of stories need to be said and how the community decides it should be represented when it takes up some issue or the other. So my point is very simple. It's very clear that there is a kind of uneven development of the media in all of these areas. And in some, it's extremely well developed. And the consciousness also about conflict or covering conflict, like in Manipur, for instance, is extremely well advanced and very well developed. In Bastar, it could still be at a very different level. And also in Nagaland. So it's very interesting how we are looking at this, completely uneven understanding of how the media should operate, and communities and public spaces and the interest and the kind of engagement with the media, as you said, Aheli. But what I was looking at is also the point that Linda made towards the end. While we are talking about this kind of uneven development of the media and even the penetration of the media in all these places, whether it is Bastar or Kashmir or Nagaland or Manipur, there's also the neoliberal media that Linda spoke of, and how that completely changes the narrative, how it completely puts in a very different understanding of all these areas, about the anti-national kind of narrative, the kind of notion that it should be that the people here are demonized in very many ways. So that I find is something that is sort of, the common thread for all of your narratives.
Any question, Gitu? Is there a question?
Comment. Purely comment.
Okay, I'll just take one last question and then make it short, please.
Pushpa madam को सूखा मटन खाए तो क्या बुखार आता नहीं है तो हेल्थ का इश्यूज है बोल के बोला साइंटिफिक रीजन क्या है इसमें?
एक्चुअली में वो मटन को सुखा के रखते हैं, उसको खाने के बाद उनको मतलब जैसे बारिश में फफूंद आ जाता है उसमें, तो इन्फेक्शन के कारण उनको वोमिटिंग आने लगती है और दस्त आने लगता है, उससे उनको काफ़ी ज़्यादा तबीयत खराब हो जाती है, कभी कभी तो कई डेथ भी हो जाती है.
Okay, I think that's a thing you can take it up later with her. We'll have to bring the session to a close. Thank you everybody, and thank you participants. Thank you for giving us this opportunity.
As we are running out of time, so we can start our next panel. It's about gender equality in the news.
Excuse me.
So as we are running out of time, we will just start our next session, which is on gender equality in newsroom. So members, those who are on tea break can quickly come within 5 minutes.